everyone to
Yes.
Women for Solutions.
Yes.
Our unstoppable founder, Laura Giadru-Koch, is with us today. I'm so honored to work with her and to help move this vital work forward.
Yeah.
There's Laura. I know Laura from our days at YPO, and we can't stop doing things together. Laura is the founder of Women for Solutions, which is a global network of both men and women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs that are really moving the whole caring economy idea and values forward. And they work across the world. Different organizations are deeply embedded with the UN, promoting things like gender parity and conflict resolution. Please look at the website. I put that link in the chat, as well as some links to some of the things that Lorraine and I may be talking about today. So thank you for taking some time to join us today. And let's get started by allowing me to introduce you to Lorraine Smith, who describes her purpose as contributing to the shift to a regenerative economy where society thrives within a healthy biosphere. Lorraine has consulted for over 100 companies, most of them large publicly traded companies around the world, including the largely unknown Walmart and Coca-Cola, across many industrial sectors, including food, agriculture, banking, electronics, pharma, forestry, media, mining and metals, and our favorite, energy. She has worked extensively with John Elkington and our very own Women for Solutions member, Louise Roper, who's CEO of Volans, as they accelerate business models and help increase corporate action in reversing global warming. In addition, Lorraine has consulted, worked, or held advisory board positions at Brazilian forest companies, the Aspen Institute's Business and Society Program, Sustainability, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, and is a member of Future Fit's Business Benchmark Expert Council. All in all, a basic slacker, as you can tell from that background. Lorraine is known as a forest whisperer, a spinner of fine tales in her creative writing, and a spinner of fine felt, which I can attest by having received this beautiful gift in the mail this week. Thank you for that, Lorraine. And she speaks French, Portuguese, German, and Spanish. She's originally from Toronto, but has lived all over the world, including Australia, Brazil, Germany, New Zealand, and even New York City. But currently, Montreal et à la maison is home. So welcome to the W4S tribe, Lorraine. With that.
Wow. Thank you, Eli. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm just, when I look at the frames across the Zoom call, it's, yeah, it makes me feel pretty good. So thank you.
I am delighted that you agreed to talk with me here. I came across Lorraine when I listened into another webinar she was participating in, and she used some expressions that just really caught my mind. And she spoke about being in purpose to people and planet. And it was just different language for me. It may not be for some of you here. And I thought there's something to that. And so we started meeting every so often and throwing spaghetti on the wall. And I said, let's have some kind of a provocative conversation. And I knew exactly where to have it. And it was here. So let's get into it. And we all know business is grappling with the responsibility to do better. And I think we can agree we often see performative actions versus actual performance. We even read about expressions like purpose-led, purpose-driven. And I'm going to quote something I read recently that I just thought was shocking. It said, "We see the deployment of bolt-on solutions purpose machined to preserve the value of slow approaches, slow assets, and slow expertise." It was just arresting. It was like you could actually hear the gears of the industrial complex just like gobbling up this notion of purpose. So, Lorraine, before I actually ask you whether purpose is a myth, allow me a brief walk down memory lane, okay? So we know in 1970, Milton Friedman said purpose, the purpose of a company is to increase its profits. Then in 1990, Terry Hallman, who was an advisor to Bill Clinton, said the purpose of a company is people. And now in 2021, according to the principles of purposeful business, the purpose of business is to solve the problems of people and planet profitably and not profit from causing problems. So it's like purpose is now all about the relationship between problems and profit. So let me just stop there and have you sort of give us your thoughts.
Oh, wow. Yes. Lots I could say, but maybe I'll just ground us in some language that might be useful going forward, because as you're noting here, Eli, the word purpose just gets tossed around so much. Mm-hmm. So I like to fall back on the amazing Donella Meadows, and I suspect most people on this call will be familiar with her leadership thinking in systems thinking. And what many may not realize is Donella Meadows was also a hand spinner. She spun her own yarn. And I don't think that that's random. As somebody who spins, I think creating yarn from loose fluff is a form of applying systems thinking. There's lots more I could say on that, but for now, Meadows shared widely, and it's easy to find online, the 12 places to intervene in a system, and offered some thinking around how we can look at ways to make change, meaningful change in complex dynamic systems. And one of the most meaningful or sort of highest impact leverage points is in the purpose of the system. What does the system do? Why does it exist? That is a more meaningful leverage point to intervene than in, for example, the way we count things within the system, or even the rules and accepted norms within the system. Those things matter. They are leverage points, but the higher leverage point is the purpose. And I think when we look at how companies function, we can see that happening, and I'll touch on that a bit more. I do want to caveat that one of the things Meadows said long ago when she first put that out there, and I think we see this happening over and over, is it's not really that simple, right? She wrote very nicely 12 places to intervene in a system, and they're listed as a hierarchy. But then caveated herself, saying it's not as simple as that to put things in a hierarchy. It's more complex and dynamic. So I don't mean to oversimplify. And I would say, wrapped around purpose, the even higher leverage point is worldview, mindset, or paradigm. And I think we're going to bump into that today. So that is why it matters. And I think, and Eli, you tell me how far you want me to go here, if you want to prompt specifics, but when we look at what a company says its purpose is versus what a company does, which is kind of its purpose manifested, we're seeing some very peculiar differences between says and does.
Totally agree. So that's like the perfect segue to where I'd love to go. And that's to look at purpose through the lens of different companies and different sectors. So you and I sort of talked about looking at consumer goods through Unilever, and looking at technology through Google, and then energy through Shell. So let's take their purpose statements. And I'm going to kick you off by saying Unilever, and we all love Paul Pullman, and he was really instrumental in kind of changing the mindset of CEOs and trying to move away from quarterly reporting and getting longer term investors, on the board and all that good stuff. However, when we look at Unilever's purpose, it says Unilever's mission is to add vitality to life. That's like saying you're going to add life to life, right? I don't want to be snarky, but like adding vitality to life is kind of quite a statement. And then they go on to say, we meet everyday needs for nutrition, hygiene, and personal care with brands that help people feel good, look good, and get more out of life. Take it away.
Yeah. Thanks. So, well, let's look at what Unilever actually does, which I think would help us understand if and how they're aligned with that overall purpose. And I should say, I'll try not to caveat everything I say, but I'm going to say some critical things. They're going to be negative. And I mean the things I'm about to say, but I'm not saying this to bash the very significant, and I would say ambitious and often well-resourced and for sure well-intended work that is being done at Unilever and many other companies following suit. There's a reason people point to them as leaders, and I have a lot of respect for what they're trying to do. And I think it's not just falling short, it's not even pointed in the right direction. And it's not just to kind of poke holes, it's to say, I know we can do better in that spirit of vitality. And I think we need to, in order to genuinely get where I'd love to go. So what concerns me about Unilever's actual purpose, what they're doing? Well, when I look at their, let's just look at the, they've got their three areas, right? Their grooming or sort of self-care, food, and home products. Self-care, I'm probably the wrong person to talk to because I use basically nothing. So when I look at their products, I'm like, that's a lot of wasted single-use plastics that don't need to exist. Whereas when you look at their sustainable living plan, one of the ways in which they claim, truthfully, but almost uselessly, that they are on track is that things like, in their Axe deodorant, their men's grooming product, 25% of the packaging is non-virgin plastic. And it's like, okay, back up. Why are we using so many products that tell our bodies to smell a certain way? Like, that's kind of blunt, but like, why are we disguising the way we smell? And you might say, well, because sometimes we smell really bad. Why do we smell bad? Because we're stressed, because we're jammed into subways, because we hate our jobs, because we live too close together. Like, be really honest about. That's right. And our diets are crap. So, but even if you say, no, sometimes I really do want to smell like a fake lilac. Okay, but there's a way to do it that doesn't require 75% virgin plastic. Like that is not aligned with life's principles. There's a lot more I could say on the grooming stuff, but let me come to food for a second, because I think it's an easier place to see the obvious. A lot of people might want to debate with me about like how we smell. But food, there's very little debate that eating well is a good idea and that we've got some challenges on the nutrition front. So when I see the signals they make around nutrition, I think, oh, that's awesome. Very senior corporate leaders at one of the world's largest food companies saying that they want people to eat well and feel better. But then you look at how they made their money, which is, again, what do? They make money. How do they make their money, right? That's their real purpose. So about 20 billion euros in their 2020 annual financial filings, 20 billion euros of annual turnover in their food products. And what are their main food products? They don't give you an exact breakdown of their portfolio, not that I could find, but they mention their flagship products, which is where they make most of their money. Two of their flagship products are ice cream, okay? Ben & Jerry's and Magnum. And I'm not anti-ice cream. I'm not that into ice cream, but I'm not anti-ice cream. But let's be honest, that is not what you need to be eating. If you went to see a nutritionist, or frankly, if you talked to a 12-year-old and said, what should I be eating to be healthy? They would not put ice cream at the top. Let's go to another one. Just for fun, I looked at one of their flagship savory products, Knorr, right? It's like a soup stock. The number one ingredient in Knorr is salt. The number two ingredient is MSG. Okay, you go to see that nutritionist, you talk to that 12-year-old and you say, what do you think I should eat to feel better? They're not going to say high salt, high MSG products. They're just not. So what Unilever does is deliver products in single-use plastics cultivated in monoculture agricultural environments that are not only not necessary, they're probably generally harmful to the way we live and breathe and sort of digest. So I'd love to see them living that purpose. I think it would require a radically different relationship with the soil and their agricultural suppliers, and a very different understanding of what nutrition and wellness is. That's Unilever for me. I'm sorry to say, they've got a long way to go to be even close to describing honestly their purpose.
So are you saying deodorant does not add vitality to life?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I'm kind of being tongue in cheek, but I'm also being really honest. This is kind of a big thing. I think we're due for a reframe in how we interpret our relations. Like, so much of this comes down to our relationship to self, others, and the wider world. And if all we're doing is trying to like mask how we are and then like pump calories in and pay suppliers, we've really lost the plot. I think we have a lot more vitality that we could be generating. And if you really, if you really want to know how they're living their purpose, just read their annual statement. They're making money selling these products is what they're doing.
Well, it comes back to this notion of purpose being intrinsically attached to profit. right? And now it's being attached to problems. It's really, when you think about it, tragic. Purpose should not be about, are you creating problems with profit, making a profit on, problems, or are you not making a profit on problems? And so Unilever may have, moved the ball forward in certain respects, but to your point, you have to look at if what you're doing is not in service to people and planet, should you be doing it? It's not about whether you're doing it more sustainably, it's whether you should be doing it at all, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I hear you saying, which I love. And I think that's sort of at the essence of this provocative, reimagining of what purpose is. Companies should be asking that question, not, can I do it with better packaging? Should we be making deodorant? Does the world need deodorant? Does that add vitality to life? Yes or no?
Yeah.
The answer's no, then don't do it, right?
And it's a multi-billion-dollar question. And
right.
Yeah, you could do that across their shelves. And I think, I know we were going to chat about Google. They're kind of a fun segue into the even wider world.
So we're moving. Yeah, perfect. So let's go to Google and our friend Larry Page.
The whole thing up.
Okay, so their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. They even host purpose summits. Take it away.
Yeah, so in many ways, I love Google. Like Google 25 years ago was two guys in a dorm, right? And who'd heard of them? Now they're a verb, and now there's something I do every day.
Right.
I'm definitely participating in Google. So I am everything I'm about to say is as much about my own behavior as the Google. But
Google, I love it.
But when you hear that mission, that they are organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. Okay, but what do they do? How do they make money? If you go to, so Google is of course part of Alphabet, one of the largest companies, if you look at market capitalization in the world. So they're basically like their own economy. And if you look at their SEC filings, so to see Google's, you have to go to Alphabet's. They have this amazing annual report that they put out for 2020. And 2020, let's face it, it was an unusual year. So a lot of companies took it upon themselves to set their reporting apart, to sort of say, okay, we used to do it this way and it was kind of a cut and paste, but here comes 2020, no more cut and paste. So kudos to them for shaking it up. And the way their annual report reads, the first 30 pages are quite compelling about the amazing things they've done to help people and do all the things that feel really aligned with their mission. But then when you get into the actual formal filings to the SEC, which is the stuff that the investors are going to pay attention to because it's actually what they're doing as opposed to what their marketing folks, who, by the way, as someone who makes a living doing a lot of ESG disclosures, I'm part of that racket as well. When you get to page 34, which is page 2, but you have to scroll through the other 30 some pages to how they make money, which is the subheading in the report. How they make money is entirely through advertising. And there's 2 different forms of advertising, performance-based and what do they call it? Performance and brand advertising, the 2 different kinds, but they kind of interclick, and it's all based on what do you see, where do you see it, on which device. And I was going to say there's nothing wrong with that. Let me come back to that in a second. Whether or not, like, totally neutral. There is no right or wrong. This is just what this company does. Let us notice this is one of the largest companies in the world. It is its own sort of nation state free economy that has become a verb and a daily activity for, I'm willing to bet, everybody on this call and everybody whom you know. And it says this is why it exists, but the way it makes money is by doing something totally else that you can't really see. You can be aware of it. You can see like the little ripples of it going across your screen, and you might think, see, I'm savvy. I'm not even going to click on that. But it is collecting so many breadcrumbs. Every single keystroke, every single voice note is collected, packaged, and sold. And you cannot find out to whom nor how. The asymmetry in that relationship is just staggering. It's so staggering that we can't see it. We're the cave people, right? And we see those little shadows going by at 4 o'clock, and we think there's something strange out there. It was like, no, that is the whole wide world. And we are contributing to it with our little breadcrumbs of innocently mentioning a handbag, and then a handbag gets served up to us, thinking it's no big deal because we have nothing to hide. That is one of the largest economies in the world, how it makes money. So I kind of have issues with that from a purpose perspective. And here I'm going to circle back to the Unilevers of the world, and frankly, the everybody else's of the world, because Google, let me just share with you the paragraph in there. This is in their 10K, their SEC filing, the most recent complete annual report on page 2, which is really page 34. Our advertising products deliver relevant ads at just the right time to give people useful commercial information, regardless of the device. That's also known as everywhere all the time. We also provide advertisers with tools that help them better attribute and measure their advertising campaigns. That's how much are you seeing it? What are you doing with it? Did you stay on the page, etc. Our advertising solutions help millions of companies. Just picture that for a moment. Millions of companies grow their businesses, and we offer a wide range of products across devices and formats. So I'm not opposed to growth, and I'm definitely not opposed to business. I am an industrialist. I work with industry. That is what I do for a living. I love my clients. I love my collaborators. I actually kind of love the global industrial complex. So strange and high. But when I look at how Google enables millions of companies to grow, and I know that there is no lens on that growth that says, is this growth enabling life to thrive? Is it increasing biodiversity? Is it net sequestering CO2 and bringing the economy back in balance with how the carbon cycle works and all the other cycles, the nutrient cycle, the phosphorus cycle, all the things that allow humans and other mammals and life on Earth to be? Is that growth even remotely aware that is a thing? Because if it's not, which, spoiler alert, it's not for the vast majority of those millions of companies, then that growth is cancerous. It is out of control. It is not regenerative. It is degenerative. It is highly destructive, which is why the IPCC report, if folks missed it, we can put it in the links following this, described beyond tipping point climate changes. It is why the social fabric is coming unraveled in many communities, including where we live. It's why a whole town in British Columbia burnt to the ground this summer, right? Like, these are not sort of random acts of disturbance. This is a design flaw in the capitalist machine. And so when Google says its purpose is to do all these nice things, but its practice is to enable millions of companies to grow, its purpose is horrific and totally misaligned with how life works, when it works well, when we thrive, when we have all that vitality. And even the Unilevers of the world, who are indeed working in cahoots with the Google, because it's working with everybody. When Unilever grows, that cancerous impact is felt. We are feeling it. So that's what we need to change. That's what we need to redesign.
So many questions that come to mind. And let me just put a couple out to you. First, so Google, wants to organize data, and that sounds kind of, maybe helpful, right? I think we didn't realize it meant gathering data on us, and packaging it as part of that, idea about organizing data. So there's that complete lack of transparency and disconnect. I want to ask you though, as you see new search platforms like Ocean Hero, and there's another one around trees that, every time you search, it kind of does something around social impact. What do you think about those platforms? Are they okay? Are they not okay?
Yeah, so truth be told, I don't know details of them. Like, I've kind of nibbled at like DuckDuckGo and some of the alternatives in there. my sense, and this is from ignorance, and if anybody knows more, please put information in the chat. And by the way, feel free to like heckle and query in the chat. We'll definitely
We'll have some Q&A toward the end here for everybody to have a free for all at you.
My instinct says those are beautiful initiatives coming from all the right places. And I genuinely hope that they get their legs under them and thrive. Mm-hmm. But when I picture, like if I were to do a little diagram, well, here, I'll take one. I happen to have a little felt ball right here. If this were the Google, like the size of what it's doing, take any one of those and its size would be so small you couldn't see it. And so it's like, it's like rock, paper, scissors, except those little guys are always the thing getting crushed or cut or, So, and that's a design challenge. That is where, when I see, and you referenced the work that I had been collaborating with John Elkington and Volans on, and certainly as well at sustainability over the years and independently with companies, we talk about business model design. And you can come up with amazing business model designs. And there are lots. I try on my blog, I try to, when I bump into amazing stuff, I try to showcase it. I spread all the rumors I can about what I see working. But if you design an amazing model within a broken system, I see two things, well, kind of three happening. One is it just doesn't get off the ground because it's not visible. The system doesn't know how to sort of take it up. Two is it struggles, like it goes, but it kind of limps along and doesn't thrive, doesn't take over. There was a third one. It's going to come to me. Oh yeah. Or it just gets absorbed by the system and has to, it gets bought out, right? It has to, even Ben & Jerry's, which is now a major brand, Unilever, you can see how its origins were really kind of cool, whether it was regenerative or not. We could talk a lot about the pros and cons of that model. Same with, they also, in their home care brands, they have Seventh Generation, which is another amazing company. When you look at its origins, lots of things you could shift and improve on, but where it was coming from was pretty amazing. Then these things just get kind of slurped into the machine, and their beauty gets branded and reoriented, and their purpose gets mashed into the corporate purpose. So I don't say that to say, so those guys shouldn't even bother to try. I think what we're seeing, there's a couple resources I wanted to mention that are really influencing my thinking and frankly, encouraging me with their knowledge. Because I think where we're going here is we are well beyond case studies, right? There's really cool case studies out there, don't get me wrong. And again, I try to spread rumors about them and share what I can and write them up on my blog or introduce people, etc. So I think that's great and we need more of it. And I think we're getting to a kind of paradigm level. We're getting to a worldview space where more and more of the people designing, creating, contributing, resourcing, working at elements of this dynamic living thing we call the economy are aware of life's principles, what it means to be alive, what enables us to thrive within the context of the wider web of life, and how creating value, delivering on needs, food, shelter, entertainment, all the things we need and love, how doing so in alignment with life's principles could look and feel. So as more and more people kind of go, oh yeah, we need that. We don't have that, but we need that, and show up in all the different places, we start to see the conditions that enable those new divergent ways of being existing and making it more possible for them to thrive. I mentioned two resources, one that's really kind of literally keeping me up at night, but reminding me of the truth that we need to see is Shoshana Zuboff's book about the surveillance capitalist economy. I'm going to get the title a bit wrong off the top of my head, but it's basically Shoshana Zuboff, Surveillance Capitalism with better, and somebody will know it better than I in the chat. And she's done an amazing job. It came out in 2019. So maybe because last year was such a crazy year, not everybody caught it. It's a long book because it's a complicated topic, but she's done an incredible job of explaining the trajectory that has led us to this data asymmetry, which I think is really important to recognize. It's not like a bunch of big, or 7 big bad people got up one day and were like, let's see how much damage we can do. Of course not. It's come about quite organically. And it's frankly an expression of the design that we have, which is about maximizing profits and about innovation in the spirit of making more money. And her, I would say, knowledge and ability to clearly articulate the nature of this data asymmetry in our economy and where it's come from and where it's going, and it's big, and it, like Google is one very clear expression of it, I find really helpful. We need to see it. In order to change a system, you have to see the system. And Otto Scharmer talks a lot about that as well. I mentioned there were two resources. The other is just an incredible voice. Vanessa de Oliveira Andreotti. She is the research chair at UBC, University of British Columbia, on race and difference, or some kind of title. But when you hear what she's doing, you just go, holy smokes, this woman has figured it out. Again, we can throw in the chat. She did a podcast, episode 1 of the Black Elephant podcast, which in my opinion should be mandatory listening for anybody who does anything. It explains the sort of human evolutionary paradox we are in. And she has an incredible perspective that reaches across regions, generations, and cultures, and has, I guess the punctuation mark I'll put on this before we get into energy, is that she has helped me see something that I've been sensing and lacking the vocabulary to put to, around this notion of negation. And if you just want to skip to, I think it's minute 19 in the first of the 3-part podcast, she talks about the 4 ways we negate. I won't go through it all, but the point is we have become so used to negating some very fundamental things, like we are part of a wider web of life. We're just part of this bigger metabolism, and negating that is causing us harm. And what business is doing, this is the big negation I see for business, where purpose needs to kind of snap out of it, is we are negating the scope and scale of the challenge we face. And you know, it feels good. It can feel really scary and overwhelming to talk truthfully about what's happening, whether in social justice, whether in ecosystem collapse. These are not typically seen as happy topics, and really going there and really holding it can feel awful, frankly. It can feel sort of existentially threatening. It can feel stabilizing in all kinds of ways. One of the things I've found, and I'd say, I guess I've been sort of immersed in this for about 20 years. I think for most of my life since I've been awake, and I think my parents are on the line, so they can confirm or deny this in the chat. But I think since I've been a little kid, I've just been kind of awake and aware and asking annoying questions and noticing things around, you know, nature. So the big disconnect that I see corporations having is they don't want to talk about the scope and scale. It's actually very relieving when you do. There's a sense of like, right, this is what we're actually dealing with. And we need to stop negating that in order to be able to do real things about it and really align our purpose and really redesign the architecture of individual organizations, wider industries and sectors, and then the economy as a whole, which we get to redesign. Somebody has been doing that since it's been around, and we get to be the people doing it now.
All right, so you have like touched on, introduced like massive concepts here. First of all, thank you for those resources that you mentioned. We will try to get them out to everybody, because I know I'm not posting them in the chat right now because there were too many, but we will make sure we do that with a follow-up email. All right, so before we get into energy, the favorite, one to take down, because it's just hard to even make that look good, but so you're really touching on this whole idea of, can purpose almost be retrofitted? It's like that's what people are trying to do. And it sort of speaks to some of Rianne Eisler's work. And Rianne has been a serial guest here, a good friend of Laura and some other W4S members. She is such an inspiring person as well. And I think we turned you on to Nurturing Our Humanity, where, she really talks about the entire world is all about domination or partnerism. Like, that's it. Those are the two dynamics at play. And pretty much every system on the face of the earth has really been defined through a domination lens, one of exploitation, extraction, dispossession. And that is kind of why we're here today, right? Because that has been driving business. It is behind capitalism. It's the drive behind profit and growth. If I hear about GDP growth in one more call that I'm on, I'm really going to throw something at the screen.
Yeah.
Because why do we have to grow? Why, does everything have to grow at the expense of people and planet?
Yeah.
And so huge ideas. We're going to probably take that up in another conversation because, right, isn't that what we're trying to do? And is it even possible to retrofit these businesses? I mean, we'll be dead by the time Unilever, really is in service to people and planet. It's almost like pioneers, have to just reimagine businesses differently from the ground up. And can they even do that in an ecosystem being driven by GDP, by quarterly reporting, by any of that stuff? And it's like purpose got conflated with profit, right? And now we've just added on the notion of problems. Are you making a profit on problems? Or are you not making a profit on problems? It's all about making profit. It's just about whether or not you're doing it based on society's problems. It's confounding. I love that you said that there is some liberation in actually owning and admitting to, negation, right? Or negating with Women for Solutions. Laura and her team really, really work about advancing the caring economy. Something that's been negated and excluded as a huge piece, right, of the economy and what's going on, completely ignored, not talked about, not owned. There's no truth or transparency around it. Vivian and I work with, some leaders who we are really trying to get them to understand some of these vital concepts in a different way, because they are they're corporate leaders. And they're very used to the system of things that's been really working for them. And everybody wants to think that they're all about impact now, and they don't actually even understand the mindset. This is not about changing your business as much as it's about changing your mindset, right? And how do you do that? So we're going to get to how do we do that in a minute, but let's go after Shell. All right, well, we're on a roll.
Yeah.
All right.
There's so much there. So energy, I think, is a great one to talk about because, and by the way, Kristen, I saw your question. The woman's name is Vanessa de Oliveira Andreotti. But I think if you go Vanessa Black Elephant Podcast, you'll hit it. And if not, we'll make sure the links are provided after.
Let's just begin with Shell's purpose, right? Which is to power progress together with more and cleaner energy solutions. Back to you.
So energy, this is where I can hear, maybe even I can hear some of you thinking, and certainly, critical conversations I've had, people going, hang on a sec, you got to be realistic. Like, what are you going to do? Take down the whole grid, right? Lay off everybody in energy. You can't turn the taps off that fast. It's not going to happen overnight, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, okay, agreed. And I'm not here to propose that suddenly Shell stop everything it does and, put up a bunch of windmills everywhere. And of course we could come up with problems with the windmills. But I'm going to step out of the frame for a minute and say, actually don't care what anybody else says. It's not really up to me or anybody else to decide what natural thresholds are. Like it's like debating with a lighthouse, right? Like you're either on course to smash into it or you're not. And if you are, you can debate and have discussions about how you got there and who organized it and who's carrying the map and, how long it'll take you to hit the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is like, I'm just a lighthouse, like smash into me if you must, but if you can choose not to, maybe choose not to. So then I come back into the frame and I say, Shell is like one of many large global energy companies getting on the net zero goal bandwagon. They've pronounced a net zero goal by 2050, and they've put some clarity around that. What that means is that they will be, their products, including in their customer use phase of their products, will be producing net zero. I believe they define it as carbon emissions. And, there's lots of fine print under that, but they're trying to put some muscle to it. So if you look at their purpose, and they are like unbelievably transparent. I mean, the stuff they publish where you're like, wow, I guess their legal counsel signed off on that. So, and they say some pretty harsh things about themselves. They also publish what I think are some of the better scenarios out there. So companies are getting more and more into publishing climate scenarios and describing like, if this, then we would that, and if that, then we would the other. And Shell has produced some of the more useful ones out there, going right out to 2075, I think they do. So I find that actually pretty good. Like of the three companies we're talking about here, Unilever, Google, and Shell, I would frankly give Shell top marks for useful information, very thoroughly vetted and organized and compiled data that is cross-sectoral, because of course energy touches everything. And for humility, I think they say a lot of things in a way that's like, we know this is a kind of a beast and we need to do something about it. But then I would also then drop the hammer and say, okay, but your purpose is all that great stuff about clean energy and progress. How do you make your money? Because now they have a net zero goal and they have all kinds of noises being made about renewables. Maybe I am lacking savvy in how to read their financial statements. And I actually tweeted a couple times. The way they tell you to contact them is through Twitter. And I tried, it's been over a week of saying like, I got some questions and I haven't heard back. I guess, you know, it's kind of summertime maybe. But let's just put this in context. They make $180 billion a year. Just like ponder what you would do with that money, $180 billion. And that was their net revenue in 2020. And they show the segments of where that revenue comes from. They break it down by segment. And it's upstream, it's integrated gas, it's oil refining, oil trading, oil marketing, and chemicals. And so I was like, well, I'm not sure which one of those, like where renewables fits in, because they've been making a lot of noise about renewables for a long time. And I don't know, I could be very wrong. So please fact check me, tell me where I'm wrong here. But from what I can tell, they don't make a dollar from renewables, which might mean it's because they're only spending money right now. And I get that it's a big investment. When you look at their investor deck, you see that they are positioning renewables as a future segment. So they talk about their current segments, which are all those ones I just described. Drilling, refining, and selling oil and gas, fossil fuels, the things that we know are mathematically, undebatably lighthouse-like over the tipping point and not cool. But that one of their future segments is renewables. So the way they make their money right now is by pushing us off a climate cliff. They get paid. They made $180 billion to make the sixth great extinction possible and make the likelihood of anyone who has offspring, I don't, that their lives are in a kind of scarcity turmoil that we can't really fathom because it's just kind of existentially, some people can, I think more and more of us in this field who spend time talking to elders and people with different ways of seeing and understanding time and intergenerational trauma and whatnot, we can start to fathom. But for the most part, this gets to that negation thing again. So $180 billion in annual revenue was generated to cause existential catastrophic harm. It also, by the way, enabled transportation and lighting. And I know they're not so much in electrical power, although they're committed to 500,000 EV charging stations by, I think, 2025. And I'm part of the energy grid. I'm in it. We are having this conversation thanks to the energy grid, which is kind of separate from oil and gas, but related. So I'm part of it and I need to contribute to that redesign. And the way I see that, and maybe this segues to where we want to go in our final chunk here, but I see a very critical role, critical as in essential and also critiquing, being just telling the truth about it, not in an accusing or judging way, and not in a, like, I told you so, or stick it to the man. Because if Shell divests of things that somebody else buys, nobody's won, right? We don't want Shell to just divest. They're divesting of a lot of stuff and that gets some news, but there are buyers for the stuff they're divesting of. So the thing isn't to just like, I've got this bad thing, I better sell it. It's like, I've got this bad thing. And I'll give an answer to, can we, retrofit these companies? No, I don't think we can, because they were designed to do what they're doing. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do. They're doing it brilliantly. They're doing it so profitably that some companies doubled in value during the pandemic, during a time when there was massive suffering, supply chain shortages, we don't have to look too far to see very, very serious problems that have emerged because of the pandemic. And a number of companies, if you scan the stock market, literally doubled in financial value. So they are so well designed that they can weather even the worst of the worst that humanity has to offer. But it's supposed to serve humanity and serve us within the wider web of life. So we can't retrofit them, but we can benefit. And where I look for inspiration is to other life forms that have figured stuff out over 3.8 billion years. And I take, for example, the oak tree. When the oak tree reaches the end of its lifespan, for whatever reason, natural or, some other calamity, lightning or disease or overcrowding from some other species, it doesn't try to retrofit itself to be a younger oak tree or to be a poplar, or to become a sapling of some other sort. It falls to the forest floor. And the amazing, amazing density of nutrients, varied that they go into the forest floor and they compost. And a breadth of organisms benefit from that. And I think we are going to see these oak trees that have been seminal to our economic forest for most of our lifetime. So it's hard to imagine some other kind of forest, but forests have renewed and, they've been burned down and come back many times before. I think we're going to see a lot of composting, a lot of nurse logs, as you see those other trees growing up, and other creatures really benefiting and thriving as a result. I think it's going to be very disruptive and bumpy, especially for those, I'm going to say, white Northerners who really just don't get it. They're like, yeah, it's going to be a bit rough, but my retirement portfolio is great. It's like, there's a lot more I could say on that, but
for sure. Well, and I know I want to move toward some Q&A and give everybody a chance to interact with you. Let me just sort of kind of conclude this piece by saying this whole idea of doing less harm is sort of being put forward as the same as, having a net positive impact, on the world. And it's just not, we're not buying it, right? But that's what you see in a lot of reports. I want to read from an opinion piece that was in The Guardian that sort of speaks to Shell that I just think you're going to, if you haven't, I'm sure you've read it or you'll find it, resonant with what you're saying. It said the oil industry has known for a half a century that pollution caused by the burning of fossil fuels poses severe threats to human health. By the late 1960s, Shell's own internal documents warned that air pollution may in extreme situations be deleterious to health. And then it says an economic system based on accumulating profit will downgrade all other considerations, including the sanctity of human life. Is that just like astonishing? Like, this is not new, that literally the sanctity of human life is below profits. And it talks about how having this climate friendly image is misrepresentative if in fact fossil fuels are still at the core of your business, right? That's not purpose. In service to people and planet. Okay, so why don't we give it a go and see if some folks want to interact with you and have some questions. I know people have had some commentary in here, Marisa and Servain. Anyone want to sort of step forward with some specific questions? You can put them in the chat or just come off of mute and
And I was going to say too, Eli, you and I chatted before that we don't have a hard stop right at the top of the hour. So if people want to linger a little longer, but at the same time, we're very mindful of people's time. So no pressure. Right. And I've got lots to say on what you just said, but for sure, if people want to.
I know we could go on for hours. I'm going to make sure we stop a little bit and give an opportunity to some of these feisty ladies that we've got here. So please feel free to just either put your questions in the chat or just come off of mute.
I think Marisa's waving her hand.
Hi. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Eli. Hold on one second. Seems to have music playing in the background. It needs to get turned off. There we go.
Nice though.
Thank you. Thank you. That was actually I think the intro to the SoundCloud that you just posted because I had pressed on it. Thank you for that. So two things. One is a comment and one is and I'll end with the question. is I loved this idea. Thank you very much. Of, you know, the kind of elephant in the room and the people being unwilling to look at that. And to me, you know, I keep talking about the difference between the positivity movement and positive. You know, in the psychology of positive psychology, being positive can be an active thing, but requires a lot of other skills. And one of them is mindfulness, right? Can we sit with the anxiety long enough to acknowledge it's there, and then we do something about it, right? So this difference between, I loved that, you know, if the companies could sit with the reality long enough, then we can move beyond it. But it's that, it's I can get to being positive without the denial of positivity. In a sense, I know that's semantics, but I think of it that way. The other thing is, so it's followed with my question, which is, so what, I can understand how, yes, convincing companies or inviting companies to really think this way is one step. But in addition to that, what are other steps, right? That not just in the boardrooms, and if we don't have access to those decision makers, what are other steps, right, that come to mind for you, you know of, you think of? I would be really very curious. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. And to that positivity piece, I just dropped another link in the chat. That's a really, I would say, heavy hitting article by Samantha Supaya, who's an amazing voice from the global South, if we have to categorize. And it's not easy to hear what she has to say, but I think it's really useful and very aligned with what you were just getting at there, I think, Marisa. Yeah, I have two suggestions that I think could apply to anybody who would like to contribute to this next phase of economic reality that I like to believe we're moving towards. And I'd say there's one, they go in two directions. The first direction is to receive. So I really encourage people to receive new ways of understanding. And, you know, because most of us were born and bred and raised and educated in a, I'm going to be blunt and use some language that we don't have a lot of time to unpack, but in a kind of diseased mindset where it's normal that all of the industrial norms that served my needs were extractive and fairly damaging. And we're seeing that come home to roost. But we not only didn't question it, we incentivize it, right? Like those companies that doubled in value, like a lot of people make a lot of money on that. So we have an imperative to learn and question what we hold to be true. I don't know a lot of things. I continue to learn constantly about what I can do, what I can understand, what I think to be reality. It is iterating in real time all the time. And so I really try to stay open to people I don't understand. I've spent a lot of time kind of wandering off the edge a little bit, and I'm very grateful to have been adopted by people in different parts of the world, living very different lives than me, who've taught me things. And I try to stay receptive to new information. So thing one is receive. And if it feels wrong, it's like, whoa, no, then there's probably something to lean into there. Not that you let go of your values or things that you know to be true, but that you notice what's kind of giving you some agita and try to understand where that agita is coming from. And then thing two, that I really think anybody can do, it is very challenging, but depending on the context you're in, you can do this in different ways, is just tell the truth. I happen to work mostly with large companies, sometimes with relatively senior people, mostly with marketing, investor relations, sometimes strategy or kind of different bits of the corporate world there. And even though a lot of my day-to-day work is pretty straightforward, traditional, now we can say ESG reporting. So there's frameworks and I can just check boxes. I can just show up and be like, I did what you said. Thank you for the check. But I don't do that. And if you can ask any of my clients, I think I'm a bit of a pain in the rear because I'm like, okay, we could say that, but actually that doesn't really make sense. So just checking that box maybe is what you've been told to do, but I'd like to offer an alternative. Maybe we still check the box, but I want to discuss what's in that box and share what I'm seeing. And you have to find a place that works for you. It has to be generative for you. If you're beaten down by speaking the truth, then maybe you're not in the right place, or maybe you just have to try again or use different language. So receive as much as I can. That's sort of my daily mandate. And then tell the truth where I'm seeing that dissonance. And I'm like, that feels like part of the problem. I want to tell you why, and I want to tell you what I know about it and what maybe we can do to explore that and find a better way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Lucia has one in the chat. Let me put it forward to you. We now talk of a company's purpose, and before we used to talk about mission and vision. How do these concepts relate to each other? Has purpose replaced the idea of vision and mission?
Yeah, I have two answers to that. One is like, I don't really care what word the company uses,
Right.
as long as, because I just look at what they do versus, or I try to see what they do. But in that podcast that I put the link to, I learned a word that I hadn't heard before, and I have to look it up. Heteroglossia. And heteroglossia, the way I've interpreted it, the dictionary definition is a little different than the way Vanessa Andreato was using it, but I think it's really, really meaningful in this conversation. So I'll paraphrase how I understood it. Heteroglossia is when a word or a phrase is being given distinct meanings by different listeners. So I may use a word, let's say sustainability, and one of you hears eco-efficiency or energy savings, the other hears saving the world, and the other hears capacity to sustain itself. It's heteroglossic. It's shifting around, like it's shifting across this room of different individuals, and or it's shifting over time. When I first entered this field, formally entered the field of corporate responsibility, people talked about CSR, corporate social responsibility. I pretty much never use that term now. In fact, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit. I talk about regeneration, but I see regeneration going all heteroglossic. So purpose, mission, vision, we could define. MBAs probably take whole days at school to talk about what it is and what it isn't. I would come down to, what is it for you? What is it for the company? I guess the only darker circle I would color around is the word vision describes, what do I see? And for me, whether it's written into a corporate marketing spiel or not, I think vision is extremely important for the path we're on, because it's how we can embody what we hope to become. So I see vision as an opportunity to imagine and then create the possibility to become. And if I can't see it, and this is why, to Maurice's question, why I seek out or let bump into me alternative worldviews, because, a lot of people will say, you talk about Unilever and you say they shouldn't put shampoo in bottles. Like, well, what do you want? It's like, well, where can we start? Like, I can imagine a whole universe that doesn't have a shampoo bottle. Like, that's really easy for me to see, because I don't have a shampoo bottle. I have a shampoo bar, which I use very occasionally. I do not have single-use plastic shampoo bottles in my world. I can see it. That is in my vision. It's not that my vision is a world without shampoo bottles. It's just my world doesn't have shampoo bottles. I have to be able to see it. So I would say vision is incredibly powerful. And however you see, maybe you feel it, maybe you draw it, maybe you dance it, like whatever way you can make a reality feel true to you is extremely powerful. So I love vision, regardless of what corporations use it for.
Awesome. Let me put out another word, and maybe you've used this. I have started using this word in my work with corporate leaders. The word is consilience. Ooh, it's a really cool word, and consilience means bringing together different approaches from different disciplines in order to come to a shared conclusion.
I love it.
And so it's kind of resonating, and it's about it's sort of inclusive, and you can bring different approaches and different perspectives, but we are going to sort of land in a shared place to solve problems and issues and stuff like that. So I just share that with you to, try it out.
Yeah, I love the sound of it. It reminds me,
Yep.
no, I don't think it's related etymologically, but it reminds me of the word mycelium, that interconnected network in the soil that I first learned about. If you haven't read Kristen Olson's book, The Soil Will Save Us, you should just
I got to read
stop.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just leave the conversation and go get it. But anyway, I love the sound of it. And I was just thinking today, so those who are familiar with what's going on in Canada will know we have a federal election coming up on September 20th. And even before the election, but it's certainly becoming a topic. There's a lot of dialogue around Indigenous reconciliation and greater awareness with our sort of intergenerational trauma and the legacy of land theft and genocide and all the bad things that happened. And of course, sprinklings of good things. And so I think a lot about reconciliation, partly because it matters to me, partly because I have very close personal friends who are Indigenous, and I guess partly just like being human. And one of the things I've realized in talking more about reconciliation is that before you can have anything truly resembling reconciliation, where I love where you're going with that word, because it feels like that potential to connect and intertwine really becomes a reality. You need recognition. And so it's my sense here in Canada, it's a unique situation, but we can see parallels certainly in Brazil and the US and pretty much around the world, where we have these differing worldviews and land relationships. I'm sure most of you, even if you're outside of Canada, heard about the sort of discovery of unmarked graves of Indigenous children. Right. And the sort of hashtag 215 or 215 became a big conversation at the beginning of the summer. And there's a lot we could talk about there. One of the things that I found particularly important to expose more dialogue on was, for many people who've been aware of this stuff for a long time, it was not an expose, it was not a headline. In fact, that very unmarked grave was already in the news in 2008, but just kind of didn't really matter at the time for whatever reason. And so if we can't even recognize that, 215 children were not honored in the way that would make human sense, right, in a caring and life-giving way, that number is actually a fraction, not just a fraction of the other unmarked graves at other schools where untold horrors were carried out in the name of sort of structural systemic racial violence. It's the way we incentivized the progress in this nation. And that's actually very connected to the way we've incentivized progress across regions and across industries. And I'm not saying that to be dark and doomy. I'm saying it's just true. And so we need to recognize, in order to be able to reconcile, not to feel guilty, not to accuse, not to say, you guys are bad and I feel really sorry and should I give you some of my land? No, that's not that doesn't help anything. That just kind of churns more trouble. It's stand back and recognize, what was the worldview that made that okay?
Right.
What was the worldview that thought religion brought
enlightenment
stuff, right? Yeah, and it was a worldview that thought integrating others within our culture would be a good thing. Like there's all kinds of stuff that I can't grasp myself because I wasn't there. So it isn't about accusing, it's about recognizing. So I love the evolution of the language and then recognizing why it can help enable new and different and better conversations.
Well, sort of as we move toward conclusion, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, is how this need to change and this need for systemic shift, right, is being experienced by people as something around that it involves sacrifice, it involves guilt, and nobody wants to do that. And it's when I have these conversations, I try to reframe it as, no, this is about growth. It's a new new way of looking at growth, because it's about personal growth, your
Yeah.
growth, you know what I mean? Not, GDP growth. And to view like you're on this journey, humanity is evolving, right? And we get illumination. And I think it is such a time of illumination right now. And our call is to actually to walk as illuminators, in the world. And I feel like that's what people like us can do, who I feel like are pioneers. And as I even hear the language we all use, it's like we are in the era of repair, restore, recycle, regenerate, renew, reconcile, like everything has RE in the front of it. Have you noticed like all our language, and we're really redoing. We're in a big reset. I can go on, right? This is a moment of a complete reset of all the systems on the earth that were built and defined in a way that has not helped. Maybe it helped a certain piece of humanity, and we know who they are. It has not helped all of humanity, right? So I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. Let me conclude with a quote by MLK around purpose, and then I want you to just really send us off. So indulge me with this. I cannot thank you enough for this wonderful conversation. We will have you back, and we will have more. Let me share. So Martin Luther King Jr. said around purpose, power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. It's just beautiful. If you would send us off to our day with some of your wise words, we would love that.
Wow, pretty hard to follow that. I'll briefly pick up on your reference to the relationship between dominance and partnership. And that really was such a theme that when you and I first spoke, sparked the creation of felt balls. It will spark some writing that's half cooked on my Medium page that I'll share. And I guess I would offer just two quick crumbs if I could. One is that although I might want to say, move towards partnership because domination is bad, move towards abundance because scarcity is a terrible mindset. What I'm realizing is these are dynamics that are ever in relationship or ever in interaction. And so to oversimplify is to polarize, right? Is to divide and state right and wrong and pick a side. And I think that comes from our linear mindset training, which most of us have. We're going to analyze, break it down, pick and go. And I'm working towards allowing a greater awareness of where there is scarcity and where there is abundance and where abundance serves. And and where partnership serves and where sometimes dominance actually is useful. Sometimes you just got to grab something by the horns and get it done. So I encourage an awareness of those dynamics and the relationship of those things, which is where, and I really will say more about these crazy felt balls, but you're seeing it here first. And that awareness, I think, can really serve us. And the last thing is I would come back to vision, and I would encourage you, and I'm reminding myself to, even in the most challenging of times, in fact, especially in the most challenging of times, to find a space inside you, me, where we can nonetheless feel, I love how Charles Eisenstein puts it, I'll paraphrase, something like the more beautiful world that my heart knows is possible. Because we know we were designed with the code to create and foster and nurture life. We are capable of the most extraordinary acts of generosity, of intelligence, of beauty, of elegance. We are beyond capable, and our minds are endlessly generative. And so I aim to hold as much as I can, as often as I can, that vision of what's possible, while letting in the new and kind of throwing, I had this in my vision, but that doesn't make sense anymore. I'm going to bring in this new thing and let that vision constantly renew. And I think with that, we'll step towards things we hadn't even thought of today, and certainly not 10 years ago, and into what we really need to be. I look forward to that. Eli, thank you so much. And Women for Solutions, thank you as an organization. It's amazing what you all are up to. A delight and an honor to be here today. And I look forward to carrying on the conversation.
We will continue this for sure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Good to see some familiar faces and some new ones. Thank you, Mom, for Lorraine's mom, for joining. You got to have Mom in the audience. Love to you all, and carry on as illuminators in this world.